Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and this is a continuation of my story. A lot of people have found these interesting and bit of memory joggers for themselves, so I'm very thrilled that it's serving a purpose other than me just regurgitating my history. So carrying on with my childhood, some of these memories are being jogged now, and I actually had a chat with Peter Richardson, my friend, on the phone the other day after he'd seen the previous video about how we found the grenade at the farm, if you'd seen that one. And he reminded me of some other things that we got up to. Fortunately for me, in the family, none of my parents, or neither of my parents, should I say, were smokers. And at the time, as a kid, my sister wasn't a smoker. She subsequently did start smoking. I'd never been interested in smoking, and I think there was always going to be that peer pressure as other people had tried smoking. But as kids, we had experimented, as you do, and we got grass clippings. It looked like tobacco, dried out grass. We rolled it into newspapers and made incredibly fat cigars. We lit these things and puffed at them. We didn't take it down, so we were sort of smoking bonfires basically, and that was enough, I think, to question why anybody, and I still do question why anybody, would want to draw smoke down into their lungs. I think that was something that prevented me from being the slightest having the slightest interest in smoking whatsoever. When going to the older school, the kids behind the bike sheds were into that sort of thing. So we didn't do any of that. So thanks, Peter, for reminding me of that one. I had another friend when I lived in Horsham, in the cul-de-sac where we lived, and his name was Christopher Beaver. Now, I'd love to hear from him if he's out there somewhere. I lost contact with him. He moved in and was there for a couple of years, I think, and then moved away. His father had, curiously enough, I believe, this is right, something to do with dams, or certainly to do with water anyway. And with a name like Beaver, Christopher Beaver, it was always something that stuck in my mind. Well, Christopher was a strange little kid, as indeed probably I was. And we would meet each other across the way and play. And one of the things I remember, terrible now to think about it, terrible things that we would do, is we would see if we could borrow some money from our parents without them knowing. Now, obviously, this was very naughty. And occasionally I can't remember the currency. It must have been new money. So maybe I managed to get 10 pence so that we could buy some, we used to get the lovely chews, the chocolate, the little sweets that you could chew, get fruit salad or blackjacks. And you'd get something like 8 for a halfpenny. So 16 for a penny, something like that. And we used to, I'd managed to find 10p or 50p or something like that, and we'd go to the shop one day and spend these sort of things. Well, one day Christopher Beaver said he came across and he had in his hand a £5 note. He'd taken it out of his mother's purse. Now, I think I'd just found, money on the mantelpiece that had been placed there. Probably a bit of spare change dropped, picked up, and what have you. I wasn't purposely delving into pockets and that sort of thing, but he had gone into her pockets, found her purse, taken this £5 note and came over with it, waving it when we met up. Now, I should have known better. And I do feel guilty now in retrospect, but we went up to Merrifield Drive in Horsham and into the little shopping parade that was down there. And we didn't spend all of the £5. I think we spent probably about £1 or so of it, because I did tell him to put the change back. not thinking that it would be noticed from a note into several coins, of course. But we bought £1 or £2 worth of licorice. We bought so much licorice. We had a big carrier bag of it, and this licorice was the sort of bootlaces, and I love licorice, but we sat there somewhere in a little camp somewhere eating this licorice until we were sick. It was horrible. Absolutely horrible. And I don't think we finished it. We shared it all out, and he went off with his, and I still had some, and I think it took me weeks to get through the rest of this licorice. God knows how many sticks of licorice or lengths of these bootlaces that we had. It was quite comical. Another thing that my mate Peter Richardson and I did was there was it must have been a Ford motor dealer in the Bishopric in Horsham. The Bishopric is just an area at the bottom of West Street, very old part of Horsham. And there was, I'm sure this is where it was, or it may have been on the Guildford Road. Anyway, it doesn't overly matter, or the Brighton Road. There was this motor factor place, this not motor factors, this car showroom that had obviously been there for a while, and it became derelict. They moved out and it was derelict. What is it with children and derelict places? I don't know, but we managed to get in there, and there were stacks of filing cabinets. Well, I say stacks, there were loads of filing, and sorry, I've got a bit of hay fever, so I may just quickly blow my nose. Filing cabinets and all sorts of cards and brochures and things. When we went round there not ransacking, but we went round there and we came away with all this stupid publicity stuff, not magazine, brochures and cards and things. And I loved stationery. I absolutely loved stationery, which is interesting because years later, when I left school, I went to work as a printer. Not the place that would have printed those particular things, but got into what printing was about. But there was something, I had this rapport with this stuff. So we found old cards. I mean, the great thing was you could draw on the back of a lot of this stuff, and that's, I think, was the purpose that we wanted to take it. And we came away with all this stuff from this place called Gilbert Rice, as I recall is what it was called. Whether it's still in existence or not, I don't know, somewhere else, but these premises were definitely empty, and we'd gone round as kids do. And something that my sister and I used to play, quite why we did this, was offices. We would set up a desk outside our room, in the doorway of our room, and I think we were just at that point trying to be grown-ups. And again, we must have been 8, 9, 10, something like that. And we would have all these things, and we would have staplers and punches and stacks of these cards that we got from Gilbert Rice and goodness knows what. And the idea was that we were always, we were working. I think as a school kid, you were just desperate to be a grown-up and be part of the work world. That seemed to be the thing that grown-ups were doing. And so we did all of that. And this is where this printed matter came in. But when you think back now, I mean, we must have been 8, 9, 10, something in that region, and the freedom that we had to be able to just go off for the day. Mum wouldn't mind, Dad wouldn't. My dad would be working. We were out. It must have been at the weekends, obviously, or during the holidays, and we would just go out, and we could be anywhere. There was another time when we went to the park, Horsham Park, I suppose about a mile away from where I lived. It's a big park, has a swimming pool, had a swimming pool in it. I do remember that when I was with the school, we used to go to the swimming pool, and it would have something like 78 degrees, and I guess that's Fahrenheit. Always seemed freezing cold, hated doing that, going to the open air swimming pool. Anyway, on this occasion that I'm thinking about is my mum drove us to the park because we must have been quite small, but old enough to be left on our own, and she went home, and we were in the park larking about, Peter and I, doing whatever we were doing, and we must have got bored because we thought it would be okay to walk home on our own. And I remember this was must have been the first time I'd walked home from somewhere on my own, and I knew roughly where it was, and I came home, and when I came home my mum wasn't in. So I remember coming in and playing and what have you, and then I saw my mum's car arrive, and she was in the car and she was picking her lip, and I looked out the window. She didn't see me, and she looked incredibly worried. Well, it turned out, of course, she came in, and then I said, "Oh, hi Mum, how are you?" And she was sort of pleased and angry at the same time, because she'd been up to the park and had walked around for ages trying to find us, and was worried out of her head what had happened to us, not thinking that we had walked home. Peter had obviously gone home to his house, and I'd come back to mine. And she was on one hand, you know what parents are like, on one hand you're relieved that your kid is okay, on the other hand you're really angry and you want to tell them off. Don't do it again. She'd been walking around this park, and I do remember that quite vividly, her picking her lip, looking incredibly worried about what had happened to her poor old son. So it must have been still at primary school, I reckon, there, because I knew how to get to school and how to come back to the park. But who knows? I don't think you could do that now. You certainly couldn't do that now. The school was an interesting place, Aronside Primary School, which I think I've mentioned the name of it before. In the last year, oh yes, because I talked about the puppets and the things like that. In the last year, here's another little memory that's come to me. Peter used to go home because he only lived a stone throw from the school, but I would stay at the school for the school dinners, and that went on all the way through the school. But in the last year, you would become, they gave you responsibility. You became food monitors. So we had these hexagonal tables that you would sit at, and everybody would sit round, and then myself and somebody else would sit at the end of this table and be the food monitors. So the dinner ladies would come along and they would bring the food down, and you might have a roast. You know, we had some lovely dinners, as I recall. So it might come this great big silver platter of roast beef, and then these great big jugs of gravy and other bowls with roast potatoes and carrots and that sort of thing. And it was our jobs as food monitors to dish up the food onto the plates and hand them round. So you'd ask each people, what would you like? Just some potatoes and some of that, yes, have some meat. And you would do all this. So you would serve up, we were dinner servers, I suppose. I don't know what we called ourselves. Anyway, so that was the responsibility in the last year. And I remember there was this little kid who was obviously in a year or two below us. And for some reason, and I don't know how he got this name, but he was known as Maggot, which is not a particularly nice name. But I don't know how he got this name, but he seemed quite happy with this name, or so it seemed. And so you'd serve everybody and say, what would you like? A couple of potatoes, some peas, and no carrots, righto, whatever. Every time you came up to Maggot, you'd say, what would you like, Maggot? Have a bit of everything, please. He had this little lisp. And it was quite curious. Every day, whatever it was, have a little bit of everything, please. So custard, gravy and all of that. When it came to puddings, we would have, say we had some sort of sponge pudding, and again we'd have these great big silver jugs, these stainless, very battered stainless steel jugs, in which there would be custard. And again, up to Maggot, what would you like? Have a bit of everything, please. And he just had this lisp. Well, it's funny because I'd only recently made this association that years later, when I was doing my Vobes show podcast, not the live that I do, but the Vobes show podcast about 15 years ago it started, I invented a character called Eric, who spoke with a lisp very much similar to this kid Maggot. And he had a catchphrase though of, that's right, sir. Everything was, that's right, sir. That's right, sir. And it was very similar, now I think about it, to this character or this little boy called Maggot. Have a bit of everything, please. So yeah, it's funny how things influence you at a very, very young age, sit in the subconscious, and then pop out years later. I hope you've enjoyed this one. There'll be more memories from my story coming up soon. So if you've enjoyed it, do give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to follow, like and subscribe. But in the meantime, I'll get back out into the countryside and enjoy some of this wonderful heritage landscape and nature. Till next time, thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.